is give everyone a chance, just by way of kind of putting some closure onto the work that you've done in this course over the past 7 weeks, is to give everybody a chance to just briefly, and I want to underline that word briefly, just talk a little bit about the lesson plan projects that you completed. One of the things, of course, about being in a class like this that's largely asynchronous and so on, is that we don't ever really get a chance to chat as a group and kind of see what's been going on elsewhere in the class. So I just think it's a nice way to just kind of put a cap on it and give everybody a chance to share a little bit about their projects. Maybe you'll hear that somebody else worked on a project that might relate to your subject area, and you might want to touch base with them. And if you've got some ideas, or they've got some ideas for you, so it's kind of good to hear what else has been going on. So again, these are, I almost hesitated to use the word presentation because I know that has all sorts of connotations of like putting together a PowerPoint and all that kind of stuff. These are quick recaps, like 4 minutes or less, and just share out, maybe the subject for what your, what subject area you were working in. What were the two specific SMART goals that you came up with for your two lesson plans? So kind of what were you working on in terms of the instruction for the students? And, then maybe just a reflection on kind of how the process went. Were there particular challenges you ran into? Did you find yourself making adjustments along the way as we were looking at incorporating technology into various pieces of this, both through the activities and the materials and the assessment and all of that? Like how did you find that working? I know some subject areas, technology kind of is a natural fit for certain types of lessons. And in other areas, it can be kind of a struggle to find natural connections to technology. So, but again, it's meant to be brief. This is meant to be more of just a few minutes overview of what your project was about and how it went, as opposed to any kind of like a formal presentation kind of a thing. So hopefully that sets everybody's minds at ease about this. So there's no real order to this. If there's anybody that would like to jump in and just kind of get the ball rolling here, and then we'll just kind of travel around the room and go from there. So you can, yeah, Scott, why don't you get us started?
All right. Let's see. I'm trying to unmute here.
Yep, you're good to go. Oh, now you're muted again.
All right. Sorry about that.
There you go. Now you're good to go.
All right. Thank you. So I still have a lot of work to do on my project, but I have two lesson plans. History, U.S. history. First lesson plan is on D-Day. And I'm actually going to give a lesson on Wednesday morning at the high school, East Granby High School, as part of that. My main SMART goals were for the students to look at a few photographs of the soldiers getting ready for the invasion, General Eisenhower addressing the troops getting out of one of the landing craft and storming the beach. They're being shot at with the machine guns, and they're wading through the water. They're going to examine two documents by General Eisenhower related to how he addressed the troops prior to the invasion, and then he also wrote a kind of a resignation letter just in case the invasion did not succeed as planned. And then as a result of that, we're also going to look at, they're going to fill out a blank map to kind of indicate, so it's kind of an interactive thing where they're going to indicate what the main strategy was, which beaches were stormed, and where the defenses were, where the paratroopers dropped, that sort of thing. So that's going to kind of be the first lesson. The second lesson is going to be related to the Manhattan Project and the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan. And students are going to basically kind of go back and contextualize based on some readings what factors went into the decision, why the bomb was dropped, going back to again all the going from island to island and the fierce resistance like to a man that the Japanese put up. They weren't going to surrender. So going on to Okinawa, for example, you had to basically go man to man and basically kill every last soldier on the island. Then you had the kamikazes that were flying into ships, and they were planning to invade finally the home islands of Japan and Tokyo, and that would have been another D-Day like invasion, which would have resulted in perhaps millions of deaths, not only on the side of the Allies, but of course in Japan and the citizens of Japan. So there's a lot that goes into the decision making, and finally, at the end of the project or the end of the lesson, the students are just going to develop an argument related to should President Truman have used the atomic bomb on Japan to end the Second World War. And of course, that's what happened. And Truman always defended that decision. It was a very, very tough decision. So that's basically the project, the two lessons that I'm working on, and the goals for those lessons. I have a lot of work to do in terms of technology. I will be having some slides based on Google Slides, and I will do some work with the Smart Notebook. And then, of course, my lesson plans are basically written. I will be adjusting them to add in the technology aspect, and I will hope to make it very interactive and interesting for the students. So that's pretty much the general outline. So I don't want to go over by 4 minutes.
All right. Sounds. Whoops. Let me get my mute. There we go. Yeah, sounds good. It's obviously some pretty heavy topics there. So there's obviously a lot to dig into there. So it's good to find some angles on it that will get that student interaction and kind of make that piece of history contextual for them and really give a sense for what that was all about. So. All right. Well, thank you, Scott. Sounds good. Who would like to jump in next? I had two hands go up. Scott, Robert, why don't you go next? And then Evgenia, you can go after Robert. So.
All right. So for my two lesson plans, I chose two elements of the writing process. So I teach English language learners, and I decided to kind of focus my first lesson on academic writing and citing sources for a research paper. So my students would be looking at examples of citations in following a particular sort of conventional formatting of APA, MLA, and then getting them to go about creating their own citations for papers that they have selected to support their own writing. And the second lesson plan was focusing more on peer editing, so giving them practice in actually providing feedback to their peers on their writing as it stands at the moment. So the SMART goal for the first lesson plan was, let's see if I can find it. So by the end of this lesson, students will be able to use citation guidelines to generate fully formatted citations for student-selected sources that follow the conventional style associated with academic texts. And then for the second lesson plan, the SMART goal was using a correction symbol checklist. Students will use collaborative writing software to begin to provide direct feedback in the form of annotations on a classmate's research paper draft, which will inform subsequent drafts as part of the ongoing writing process. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much where I got.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we all love writing citations, don't we?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's my students hate me for it, but it's a necessary evil.
Yeah. No, it's and then if then and they decide to come out with a edition, 7th edition or whatever, where they decide that now instead of a comma here, we're going to use a colon and all of that, and this is going to be italicized now, and before it was in bold, and Yeah,
Right,
it's
right.
always a fun
To-
topic.
Totally arbitrary, but yeah,
Yes.
it's the point is following, following the guidelines as
Yes.
closely as possible. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Robert. Sounds good. And Evgenia, why don't you jump in?
Okay, hello. Now my content area is like ESL, so we have to take from the Common Core state standards. My first challenge was actually finding the standards because their website was down. It redirected me to another website, and that wasn't the layout that I was used to because I've used them in the past for other courses. So finding them was a bit of a challenge, but I did, so that's okay. My first lesson plan focuses around root and affixes. In particular, my the students, after watching a set of Google slides, they have to provide definitions for terms such as root, affix, prefix, suffix, infix, and they have to be able to define what prefixes, Greek and Latin affixes are, like anti, endo, multi, extra. Um, and they also have to be able to break down words into their constituents, meanings, the affixes and the roots, and then define what the word is through the use of both. That is one. So I have the Google slides in there. I have a Kahoot quiz, and I also put in Jamboard. We used it in another one, so I liked it. I'm like, okay, yeah. And then my other lesson plan has to do with active and passive voice. Um, Now I did a PowerPoint presentation for this one. I started very basically, like having very like minimal things on the PowerPoint because I didn't want to overwhelm them. But then as I realized that I will not be there teaching them, and that there are students who might not have like the basic knowledge of the terminology, I incorporated more and more. And I also leave it up to the student to like πώς το λένε, I leave it up to them. Like I have extra links to websites so they can, if they feel that the what I'm giving them is not sufficient, they can look it up there. But it has to do with also the level of the student. So I didn't want to overwhelm everybody with 20 slides, but whoever wants to, there's extra material for them. So in there, I have a PowerPoint presentation. Um, I'm gonna probably incorporate my instructional video there, and I wanted to ask if it's okay to put the instructional video within the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, sure.
That's
Why
okay?
not? Yep.
Beautiful. Because I would like to introduce basic terminology like object, subject, verb, and noun. And because I learned through other classmates that people don't quite know what those are. They know implicitly but not explicitly. As a second language learner, it was very like peculiar to me that that happened. So I was like, don't take anything for granted. And then at the end, I'm gonna quiz them to determine what they have learned.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, my mom was a ninth grade English teacher for her career. And one of the things that finally convinced her there was time to retire was when they actually literally came out and told her that they were not supposed to teach grammar anymore. And
Uh,
that was like a huge thing for her. And I think, like you were saying, with prefixes and suffixes, like we had to learn the Greek and Latin roots for everything, and that's been so useful because you run into a word you don't know. If you can pull the word apart, you can usually figure out what it means. But none of that gets covered anymore, which is a surprise to me. But I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, there is a part where I have to teach them that they need the conjugated part of to be and the past participle. And I actually had to incorporate two separate slides about what is conjugating to be and how we form the past participle.
Yeah.
Because I feel, even though this is eighth grade, so to me as a second language learner, we learn this very like in the beginning. So I'm like, eighth grade, really? But yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm trying to cover everything that I can.
Yep. All right. Well,
Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you. All right, let's keep the ball rolling here. Who wants to jump in next? Do, 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 do. Anyone? All right, Kristen, why don't you go ahead?
So I teach Spanish, and my unit focuses on developing students' abilities to talk about places that they visit in their community and also what actions they do there. So first off, I made a Google slideshow, and in that slideshow, that was really just introducing all of the vocabulary. And I also integrated oh shoot, what's it called? Pear Deck. I integrated Pear Deck into that. So students had a chance to match the vocabulary with a picture of like a visual representation of the term. I also made my instructional video for that lesson specifically. So in the video, I had a lot of visual representations of the vocabulary, and I stated, okay, I go here and I do this here, and then I repeated the word another time. And I also created a like space for students to repeat after me after each vocabulary word. And in the second lesson, I wanted to bring in culture, so I created an opportunity for students to compare a market in Mexico with where they go to purchase different items. Because in the market in Mexico, you can buy food, you can buy clothing, you can buy stuff for your house, pretty much everything. Whereas here in the U.S., we have to go to a bunch of different places. So I wanted them to compare and contrast where they go to do that kind of shopping versus where other people would go. So at the end of that lesson, I asked them to create a presentation of about 2 minutes with a partner where they actually make that comparison. And I left it open to them how exactly they wanted to present that information. So they could use maybe VVideo, they could use Flipgrid or Screencastify, like any video editing software, or they could create a slideshow and present it in front of the class or a poster and do the same.
All right, sounds good. All right, yeah, let's keep things rolling here. So, Ashlyn, thank you for joining us. If you haven't figured out, we're just kind of going around and sharing out briefly about our projects. Um, is there someone else who would like JT? I see the hand up there. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm just going to touch up on some of my lessons that I did throughout this semester. And so I'm a physical education teacher, and I taught this semester at Glastonbury High School. And these lessons are going to be catered towards 10th grade PE. So um, I'm just going to go lesson by lesson. The first lesson I did was resistance training. My whole unit was on resistance training, and the first lesson was lower body training. And I'll just touch up on some of the SMART goals that I came up with, which I did goals for the psychomotor objective and then the cognitive objective, where they can discuss in brief. So the psychomotor objective was students will be able to perform the correct technique for the goblet squat, deadlift, reverse lunge at different stations around the gym. And my cognitive objective, SMART goal, was students will be able to explain the benefits of resistance training for the lower body for an active lifestyle by answering several questions, looking for at least three benefits per each workout. Going through that first lesson, some technology I also used was Kahoot to check for understanding, Huddle, which if you don't know is like you post and submit videos or highlights. And so I had the students submit videos of them outside of class, making sure they had the correct form and just showing that they're getting after it outside of school. We're not just, working in class and that's that. Moving on to lesson 2. So lesson 1, I did lower body. Lesson 2, I did upper body. My SMART goal for the psychomotor objective was students will be able to perform the correct technique for a push-up, tricep dips, bicep curls at several stations around the gym in 5-minute intervals while taking turns with partners. So this was more of a high-intensity interval training, and it was a good circuit, so students got a good workout there. The cognitive, I wanted the students to explain the benefits again of resistance training for upper body and providing 3 examples, posting a video on Flipgrid to at least 2 classmates. And so this lesson, they really worked more with groups and partners, and there was a lot of peer feedback. I also used for technology on top of that was Huddle again, and I used heart rate monitors as well to make sure that they were getting a good cardio hit. And that was about it for my 2 lessons that I taught. this semester.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, PE tends to be one of those areas where some people's initial reaction is, How am I going to work technology into this? We're playing badminton in the gym, sort of a thing." But there's always opportunities there if you're looking for them. So it looks like you've got a good range of things in there on your lessons. So,
Yep.
all
Great.
right,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, JT. All right, we're past the halfway point here. Who wants to jump in next? I know we might have a couple people who can't contribute. I know a couple people are on mobile devices and maybe traveling, but um, anyone else want to jump in here? Yeah, Jeremy, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So my first lesson, I'm a history social studies major, and I designed the first lesson plan on the Great Depression, and went through this. This will be for 11th and 12th graders for the most part. I listed the content area standards. I also listed the standards, the technology standards for empowering the learner, knowledge constructor, and digital citizen. Uh, One of my learning objectives was students should be able to identify, discuss, and analyze the major or minor causes, events, and factors that led to the Great Depression, such as the stock market crash on Black Tuesday, the effects of the Dust Bowl in the Midwest, lack of government response to the financial collapse and the run on the banks. A big thing with history is use of primary, secondary, and tertiary historical sources, learning about bias, learning about context of different situations in history. Let's see. I did list a textbook, but only if, the school wants me to use that, I could make homework or quizzes from that. For the most part, what I have students doing. Oh, and I've also listed things that advanced placement students could do within the class, and how I would do special ed uh, um, level things up for special ed students. So I just start off with a reflection journals coming in. I would ask them a question, show them a newsreel, a picture, tell them to write 10 minutes on the subject to see what they know, to sort of gauge what how they're learning. And sometimes in place of that, I did design the Cahoots quiz on the Great Depression, so they could use that. I did do a post-it video as well with questions interlaced, and that was multiple choice, fill in the blank, short essays. So that would be the first 10 minutes. If I needed to lecture, they would be taking notes. And then basically what I have is that they're working on these individual book reports. They're using Google Docs to collect information. They can put their own presentations into either Google Slides or PowerPoint presentation. I also am breaking them up into groups at some point for a unit. This is part of a unit long, um, because I break the unit up into like the root causes of the depression, the response to it, and then the aftermath. So it could be a whole unit presentation. So they're doing a group project and they have to present either a PowerPoint or a Google slideshow in front of the whole class. And then I'm using exit slips. So there again, I can use a program like Cahoots to do like an exit slip program with them to just see where they're at and what they've learned throughout the the lesson. The second lesson I did was the Western migration and the Mexican American War. Again, I go through the standards, I go through the technology standards, being a good digital citizen, knowledge constructor, the learning objectives. are pretty much the same, and I offer a different textbook. I also give them interactive links to go look at other historical books and web pages on the Mexican American War and Western migration, because it's a big chunk of history. It's like 1800 to 1840s. Um, and then I just have the lesson plan similarly set up where they may be taking a Kahoots or a Post-it, um, where they're writing in a journal. They're working on an individual book report using Google Docs. They're working on a group report. So it's a similar thing. And then at the end of the class, I'm asking them a question with exit slips. So um, so I'm trying to interweave technology all throughout the two lesson plans for the most part.
All
Any
right.
questions?
Yeah, no, sounds good. Yeah, between Great Depression and World War II, we've got a couple of pretty heavy topics going on here, but I guess that's the world of teaching social studies. All right, I think if my checking things here, we've got I think there's a couple more. Um, I know Ashlyn, if you want to jump in, or I think
I can go.
yeah,
I
or
just so how much are we supposed to be sharing from each one? Were
it's
you looking for something specific?
really just kind of an overview, just what the main topic was, maybe an idea of what
Okay.
the two SMART goals were, and then just a
Okay.
little reflection on the process, how it went, if you ran into any challenges, if you found ways to incorporate technology into the lessons. So, but
Okay.
just brief, nothing formal, nothing.
Okay. All right. So I'm at an elementary school, so I know a few times you posted about it might be hard to incorporate some technology depending on what it was for the students. So for this specific group, I did fourth grade. We're also an IB school, so community is huge. So that kind of let us go into a big segue of how to help in your community. Um, I'm an ESOL teacher. The group of students that I worked with, they're early intermediate, so some of the vocabulary wasn't really there. So we started with some vocabulary. So we started off with community terminology, and then we focused on how we can learn new ways to help our community. I'm in New London, so there are plenty of ways to get active in the community, both in our school and outside of school. And then we talked about the steps that we can take. And we started off with this lesson with brainstorming. So this lesson incorporated the different language modalities: speaking, listening, reading, writing. We read a book about how to help in the community first off as well. Um, and then as for some technology standards, we talked about is like 1.3a, plan and employ effective research strategies to locate information and other sources for intellectual or creative pursuits. So this was kind of finding a way to get active in the community and decide what steps that they would like to take. Um, and then we did, in order to kind of incorporate some of this technology into the course, I did two things. One was a Kahoot game. We talked, and I used that right after I introduced, or right before the vocabulary, actually. So I wanted to see some of the terms that they knew already. And then if they had struggle with the Kahoot, I made it a focus to talk about that more so in the slides to follow that had the pictures with the terminology, and most of it had Spanish included because most of my students are Spanish speakers. Um, and then we used the Chromebooks to talk about this vocabulary, what we knew and what we didn't know. And we had that on a shared Google Doc. And that was the first lesson. The next lesson, I went into sequencing words. So basically, how the students plan to put their steps into action. And in order to do that, I had to talk specifically about sequencing words like first, next, then, after that, finally. Um, so one of the standards is students will be able to use a variety of transitional words and phrases to manage the sequence of events. Students will be able to produce clear and coherent writing in which the development and organization are appropriate to task, purpose, and audience. Um, and there are various other technology standards that went into this, like even algorithmic thinking, develop a sequence of steps.
Hmm.
It all
Yeah.
kind of intertwined, so it worked out really well. So the informal formative assessment was whether they could put their steps into writing. But for this one, we used Google Docs so I could monitor them online. They shared it with me, and I could see what they did for first, next, then, after that, finally, etc. What I mentioned before. And then another way I incorporated technology is the students are young, they love Bookit. So we used Bookit to see what they really gained from that lesson, to see if they really understood what sequencing was, why we use it, why it's important. And then, this lesson two kind of went into a larger unit. I kept going. We did editing, writing, and how to edit, etc. So
All
hopefully
right.
that made sense.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but what you're talking about with the sequencing words and all of that, that is almost computational thinking in a way when they teach programming of really breaking down a process and trying to put it into discrete steps and how do those steps follow each other. I never really connected those two together, so that's an interesting connection to make there.
I was happy when I saw that listed on the ISTE standards. I was
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's exactly
yeah,
what
no,
it is.
that's a great fit. Cool.